Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Tori Parker, and I just wanted to give a brief overview of the project that I am working on, or a glimpse into what I'll be working on in the future when it comes to my thesis. So this poster is entitled Hemispheric, Positionality, Bodied, Race, Disposition. I'd first like to provide a precursor for all those virtually present and listening before jumping into the details of our discussion today. It is important that we, as scholars and participants in and outside the academy, recognize structural and institutional racism, in that it was the Black and brown indigenous peoples whose labor was exploited, monopolized, and capitalized to build educational institutions and really every structure of American society. I believe that by recognizing these historicisms, we are able to move somewhat, emphasis on somewhat, forward in rethinking the ways we evaluate, operate, and function in and outside of our academic, personal, and political spaces. With that said, I'd like to jump right into the ethnographic methods I've used to inform my work. So far, I have interviewed 3 practitioners, where 2 of which are devotees, or those who are Servite Loire, meaning those who serve the Loire spirits in Haitian Vodou. The people I interviewed are transgender, gender non-conforming, non-binary, queer Vodou practitioners. One of the experiences shared with me entailed a moment where the devotee's Blackness was questioned in a ritual setting. Ongans, priests, Mambos, priestesses, and participants lamented racially charged comments that aimed to say that the devotee was not, quote-unquote, Black enough. As an additional illustration, a transgender, gender non-binary Santero, priest of Oya, speaks profoundly on how their Blackness is labeled as other by white Latinx practitioners and what is foundationally African-derived religions. These instances aid in providing an overview as to how race and racism, as well as an individual's gender and sexual identities, interconnect and affect a sacred space. Therefore, while I utilize anthropological and ethnographic methods for obtaining information, Black studies is what informs my scholarship. Black studies helps affirm how I think, engage with, and converse with my interlocutors in the everyday, and how they shape my work. These day-to-day intimate conversations are what assist me in reforming ethnographic and anthropological methodologies, shifting their focuses and dependencies into radical tools that undo colonial logic and reteach from a more humanistic, relative, reverent, and considerate approach in appreciating Black life and our autonomies. So, when I talk with specificity about the hemispheric perspective, I am discussing the physical, corporal, and metaphysical positioning and repositioning of Black people. It is a symbolic fixation on how Blackness is transnationally viewed, translated, and the ways in which Blackness has become the mediator between social mobility, resistance, and liberation across racialized borders, as seen through the work of Leith Mullings, who invokes that racial projects formed by US regimes are evocative racialized constructions that are made possible through the process of accumulation of the time. Catherine McKittrick would say, and I am sure of it, that it is relationality that provides this grim annotation on the conductive and reproductive evaluations of being. For example, when we look to historical events such as the Parsley Massacre of 1937, as can be exemplified as the first image on my poster, we see the disposability of Black people and how anti-Blackness and anti-Black logics provoke Black death. Not realizing Haiti has been the first free Black republic since 1804, where the Haitian Revolution and the law have provided a means for obtaining freedom from colonial enslavement, provided that the Parsley Massacre of 1937 allowed the slaughtering of tens of thousands of Haitians under the rule of dictator Rafael Leonidas Molina Trujillo, whose reign signaled an obliged to welcoming racial tensions, public discord, and racial division amongst Dominicans and Haitians. However, where Trujillo staggers, Lord Guillermo Garcia Peña situates in the upright and translating Blackness by discussing what I mark as a psychosis of Blackness. For that, in order to understand the Dominican national identity, as Garcia Peña argues, the Dominican Republic needed to be decidedly non-Black, meaning because of the Dominican Republic's ties to the US, obligations to its people, and the necessity to retain agency, the Dominican Republic must forcibly instruct an individualized racial recall, as I like to add. That is, a subversion to redact Blackness in exchange for economic security. This is where I incorporate Garcia Peña's depiction of violin, where the staggering, wavering, and ebbing motion between one's reclamation of racial identity and detachment from racial proclamations. It is like saying everybody wants to be Black until it is time to be Black. So unless being Black holds social, economic, and political ties to achieving secession of colonial rule and that riches are attained, Blackness is therefore an abused commodity of transnational export. Which leads me to converse about the institutionalized anti-Black logics that have been actively perpetuated. For example, in 2016, from the months of June to about August, news articles ran rampant. Each journal write-up, blog posts, and threads on social platforms such as Twitter and Facebook detailed how the Dominican Republic sought to exile its Haitian population by revoking their citizenship, as again can be exemplified in the second image under the Parsley Massacre of 1937 on the poster in front of you. In doing so, uprooted a multitude of think pieces surrounding the history of anti-Haitianism or anti-Haitianism and its harmful history of racially excavating Haitians, Dominicans of African Haitian descent, or simply put, the exiling of those of a darker complexion. Loria Garcia Peña, discussing the liminality of Blackness among Dominican Americans and translating Blackness, when she discusses the, as she declares, aftermath of devastaciones. Devastaciones left slave and poor mulattoes to the mountains, where they migrated, that eventually caused Blackness to be viewed differently, so much to a point that mixed race communities started to use other names and descriptions to assert their difference from the European colonizers and the African slaves. So I want those virtually present, still present, to understand that the constructions and functionalities of race and racism are neither opaque or subtle, nor fixed or static, but rather are oblique and at 100% opacity, as seen in the preliminary interviews I have conducted. Roberto Strongman and Omiseke Tinsley concede in making apparent in their works on transcorporality by stating gender is an antecedent. Gender has crystallized itself as non-heterosexed and non-binary outside of Western constructions of gender performance and binary gender and sexual expressions. So I incorporate these ethnographic vignettes to have you think about how queerness functions in sacred ritual Black spaces and how colonial logics of racism, colonialism, and anti-Blackness disrupts a non-binary queer space. My presentation today is to merely provide a glimpse into the robust interdisciplinary work I intend to conduct for my thesis. The information that I have provided to you all should make clear as to the importance of understanding the multiplicity of gender and sexuality while contextualizing the influence of structural powers of policy and law. So I want to thank everybody, those present and also those who were able to come to my presentation today. If you're viewing this, thank you for watching. If you came earlier, thank you again. Thank you to everybody who has engaged with my project. I can't wait to continue this research and provide a robust work in my thesis and future graduate project.